Okay, thank you all for joining us today on this episode of the On the Mark podcast and financial forum. I'm joined today by my esteemed colleague of over a decade and a half, Gabi Foyer. Gabi, nice to see you, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had some challenging times. We're sitting here in November of 2023. And if this isn't a recession, I'm not quite sure what one looks like, right? So we're having certain industries that are really affected pretty badly by, the economy and strikes and all sorts of things. We'll get into which industries in particular are seemingly getting hit the hardest. But the topic for today is how to qualify during an economic downturn. Now, just because we call it an economic downturn doesn't mean it's a downturn for everyone. It could be strike related. It could be, industries just shifting up and down and whatnot. So there's lots of applications of this, even when the economy is supposedly booming. So one of the biggest challenges we have is typically with self-employed applicants, they typically have to qualify based on a 2-year average. So the challenge we have is banks also look at year-to-date income in most cases. So if your year-to-date income, for example, in this year has dropped off for whatever reason, a bank is typically going to pick up on that when you're going through the underwriting process, even if it's not on your tax returns. There are some exceptions to that, which we'll talk about, but it's definitely a challenge. And so people who are in this situation now where they're having a rough year in 2023 based on their income, whether it be self-employed, people that get paid on commission or bonus or whatever it may be, this year is going to be a bad year, but what people often don't talk about is how long of an impact that has on people. So you have people who are struggling in 2023. If they're in the type of industry where you need to qualify with a 2-year average of income, you have to have filed tax returns for those years that maybe don't show that downturn. So if 2023 is a bad year, let's say you rebound in 2024 and beyond, you need 2024 and 2025 tax returns in order to fully overcome this issue where an underwriter is not going to see it at all. Which means you can't file 2025 tax returns until 2026. So this is an issue that could potentially persist for the next 3 years. I hate to tell you that, people, but that's what's going to happen. So hopefully, incomes haven't dropped too much, but Gabi, we have a sort of semi-recent example of when this happened once before, and maybe you can talk about how banks reacted to that and what exactly happened.
Sure, we saw a lot of this happening during COVID, and people who owned bars and restaurants, or people who were, in any of the people industries where people, were dependent on people coming to their places of business, had very low years for those years, and the banks are looking at self-employment income. They're looking at the last 2 years of tax returns and trying to figure out what is their continuing income going to look like. So when they see, even during something like COVID, which is a once in a lifetime type of situation, they still want to see 2 good years or 2 previous years of good income to show that you have this continuation of income, and it'll be likely to continue at that level for the years that you're going to have the mortgage. So unfortunately, even when it's kind of one of these once in a lifetime downturns, the banks are looking at it and saying, well, that shows that you're susceptible to this type of thing happening to your industry. So unfortunately, they look back at it and they say the likelihood of continuing income being on this new level that you say it's going to rebound to, they can't, trust that. They need to see 2 full years of tax returns with that higher income.
Yeah, absolutely. Banks generally won't work off projections of income. They only work off of what's already been received, especially if you're in a commission only business or you're self-employed. They're looking backwards as opposed to forwards. So it's one of the inherent challenges with underwriting that we battle every day, because people oftentimes have rebounded income wise, but we just can't really document it in the way that an underwriter would be, more comfortable with it. But so would you agree, Gabi? Pretty much underwriters don't care. whatever the circumstances are. It doesn't matter if the world shut down and the government forced you to shut down your business temporarily. It's just as though it were another bad year just for no reason.
Exactly. They're being conservative, which, we all think is a good thing after we have, times like 2007, 2008. We want the banks to be conservative, but it kind of hurts you on the other side in times like during COVID or like this year where, industries are down. Unfortunately, we can't have it both ways. So the banks have to be conservative, and we can't say, but it was COVID. They are saying, well, we need to see that continuation of income.
Yeah, exactly. And it may not be the COVID reason this time, but it's the same concept. So one of the industries, the first one that always comes to my mind, because our team's bi-coastal, we do a lot of business in New York and California in particular, and the surrounding areas, but the entertainment world, as though one strike weren't enough, they had two at the same time, a writer's strike and an actor's strike. And a lot of our clients are in the entertainment space, and they may not be always a red carpet celebrity type of client, but a lot of people support that industry. And when you had the writer's strike, there weren't shows being created. So it wasn't just the writers that were out of work, and the actors had other issues and things that they had to battle through their own union strike. That one, again in November of 2023, hopefully is about to be over, the second one, but this has been going on since I believe March. So you've got people who, for roughly 8 months, give or take, haven't worked, and by no fault of their own, there just haven't been shows being produced. And with entertainment, it's very interesting because there's so many industries that are affected when entertainment shuts down. So it's not just the writers and the actors, it's the local restaurants that support, food orders that come from sets where they have, it's called craft services, for those that aren't familiar with this. And so restaurants locally really struggle when the entertainment world is shut down. It can be entertainment attorneys and, all sorts of different people that are connected to that industry that may be affected. It's not necessarily just the people that we naturally think of. Oh, it was the writers and the actors who were striking, but the shutdown of that industry really affects a lot of different businesses. Gabi, can you give any other examples?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about it right now, but the real estate industry, where, a lot of people, obviously, anyone who's a mortgage broker or banker or a real estate agent or a realtor or an appraiser, they're all going to be affected by this downturn where, the less houses, the less mortgages that are being given, the less houses that are being sold. All of the people in the industry that are commission based are going to have the same issues where they're not going to have as good of years on their tax returns. And like you're saying, there's other supporters. It's not just real estate agents and mortgage bankers and brokers. It's the people who stage the apartments. It's the photographers who take the pictures of the apartments. It's all of those, supporting roles in the real estate industry that are also going to be affected by these years that, with the higher interest rates. So too, and similar to that, are real estate investors, where people who own property and they rely on the rental income coming in to help them out. We were talking about COVID. We were talking about even nowadays, you've got tenants who unfortunately can't pay rent. And in certain areas, you have, like in COVID times, there were moratoriums for evictions and people's properties were sitting vacant where they weren't able to increase their rent or collect any rent. And they're going to be affected as well. So if people have, even if it's like Mark, we talk about a real estate side hustle where they're having income coming in that's supporting their regular income. If that's not there, that's going to affect their overall ability to qualify in the future.
Yeah, we actually had a very recent example of a client who owned a 4-unit property and relied on that income, and she had 2 tenants that didn't pay, and the law basically said you can't do anything about it. You basically have to let these people continue living there even though they're not paying you rent because of COVID. And that lasted well beyond what people would classify as the COVID period. I think it just ended like in the last few months. And now she has tenants, but the income doesn't show up on her tax returns because she didn't have tenants last year and the year before. So it's affecting people in that way. And one other one, just because there have been seemingly so many strikes lately, the automotive industry. as well. So people who, you know, I mean, we don't do business in Michigan, but, you know, I would imagine that people in Michigan were really struggling, but also people who sell cars and service cars, like there's not as many of them available to sell when strikes happen. So it can affect a lot of different industries in a lot of different ways. And different people are affected in different ways, but I still think, and we've been talking about this a lot, like there are reasons why now is the opportune time to buy. So, and I'm very transparent about my own situation. I really firmly believe that there are opportunities out there. I just closed on an investment property 2 weeks ago because I firmly believe that all these concessions you can get, and you're not negotiating against 30 people and having to bid, you know, 20-30% over asking, is presenting a small window of opportunity. So I actually think that now is an opportunity. This sounds very counterintuitive, but now is an opportune time to buy because interest rates are high. Everybody thinks it's the exact opposite, but as an investor, you make money on when you get into the investment. That's when you really can kill it on an investment property. Or on any real estate for that matter. And obviously you don't see that money until you sell it or cash out or whatever it may be, but you're setting your bar at a much lower price, and the amount of debt that you have to incur is less because of that. So let's hope we're going to continue to get that message out there over and over and over again, because I think people are really, buyers just can't quite comprehend that. And they're really struggling with that decision because they look at the higher prices and higher interest rates, and, you know, prices haven't really come down dramatically in most of the markets that we're in, but it may be softening a little bit to where there's more opportunity for people to negotiate, or maybe there's less competition, or whatever it may be. It's a little bit of a softening. I wouldn't say, definitely not a market crash, but when those interest rates come down, it's going to be a flood of all these buyers who are waiting for the miracle of 3% interest rates, which will probably never come back again unless the world shuts down again. But I do think that there are really great windows of opportunity for people to buy if they're willing to do so. And there are creative ways to do that, even in an economic downturn with all these issues that we just talked about. So what can you do if you want to buy now? What can you do about it? So there are some really unique loan programs. Some of them are state, you know, restricted, like for example, New York. The regulators in New York are very strict on non-traditional programs. So some of these programs might be available in, for example, California, but not in New York. Some are available across the board. So one that comes to mind is called a no ratio loan. It's kind of like the old, way back when, for any of you who were in real estate, you know, 15, 20 years ago with us, there were no doc loans where you literally didn't have to disclose anything. No employment, no income, no assets, none of it. Basically, you got approved based on how much you were putting down and the appraisal and your credit score. Those don't quite exist anymore, but there's a variation of it which solves the problem that we're talking about today, which is the income side. So we have programs. Now, the rates are not going to be great, but it's an opportunity, again, to get in at a lower price. If you have this issue and you can't qualify otherwise, there are programs that will allow you to qualify without having to disclose employment or income. So if you were, for example, let's say you wanted to buy in the middle of the strike and you weren't actively working, it's hard to, you know, not have that come up during the underwriting process. This program would be a fit for that, because even if you're not working, you don't have to disclose employment. You don't have to disclose how much income you're generating, and it can be a really, you know, effective tool to get you in the door, so to speak. Bad pun. But to be able to allow you to buy at that opportune time when you find the right deal to make that happen. There are other ones where income is less of an issue. So we have what we call asset depletion loans. So if we have a client who is high on net worth, but, you know, maybe not working, could be somebody, again, I keep coming back to entertainment, a writer, director, someone who has accumulated some money over time, but just currently isn't working, which for normal underwriting is a problem, because underwriting is very income driven. That's one of the main factors, although there are others, obviously. So that could be an area where we can use something what we call asset depletion, which is where we take whatever income we can use. So commonly we use this for retirees or people who are in between jobs or relocating, so they don't have their job yet. But it's a way to convert whatever money they have in the bank, including cash, investments, retirement accounts, things like that, into additional qualifying income to be able to help them qualify for a loan that otherwise they might not be able to qualify for. We also have loans. We're doing one right now for a client who's an animator in LA. She hasn't worked since March, but we have some programs where we don't require a profit and loss statement for the current year. So the loan approval is now fully approved based on the 2 prior years of tax returns. So if you want to buy and you're in this category of buyer who has this issue, if you buy and you can take out what we call a conforming loan, one that's backed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and you purchase before April 15th tax deadline, you won't have to show year-to-date income for 2023. So another reason why now might be the time, if you're caught up in this web, that loan might get approved. Whereas if you go beyond that date and a lender starts asking either for tax returns or a P&L, it's not going to work, and you have to find another solution. There are a couple others that are based on bank statements or P&Ls over the last 12 months. So for example, we're in November now. So let's say November through March for someone like, I know I keep coming back to this, in entertainment, for example, because there was all these strikes. Maybe they did really well from November to March. So that's enough income as though it were a full year's, even if it were a full year's of income, to be able to qualify, but it doesn't line up with the tax year, right? Which is usually December, January 1st to December 31st. You can use the inflow and outflow of cash into your accounts, business accounts or personal accounts, as a bank statement loan, or you can do a loan that's based on a profit and loss statement that just shows the trailing 12-month window. So in some cases, if clients made enough money in that, in that prior window of time, they might have been able to qualify for a loan that, if they go forward 12 months, they might not qualify for. Because when these strikes end, for example, it's not like people go back to work on day one, right? We're now coming into the holidays. So the entertainment world is naturally slow. Real estate is usually slower this time of year, depending on your market. So it's not like things just snap back immediately once things change. But the other thing you can do, and Gabi, maybe you can talk about this one, is like, how do you make it so that your monthly payments are lower? Like, what are some different strategies that people can be looking at to be able to help them qualify for a loan that maybe they were on the borderline of previously?
Sure. So the first thing that we'll talk about are adjustable rate mortgages, or ARMs. And in the past, these were, not the greatest loans for people to take out because interest rates were so low. Though traditionally people default to a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, right? They want to lock in their current mortgage right now, and they want to have that for 360 months for the entire life of the loan. However, we're in an environment right now that we haven't been in 20 plus years, where interest rates are significantly higher than the average, or where they should be, or whatever the case may be. And people are taking adjustable rate mortgages to lower their monthly payments for the first few years of the loan. So how does that work? It's still a 30-year loan, but instead of the rate being fixed for the entire 30 years, it's only fixed either for the first 3 years or 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, and then it adjusts after that. So by getting a loan like that, maybe you'll have a percentage point lower, or whatever the case may be, depending on how long you lock in rate for the next 5 years. And then after that, it'll adjust after the 5-year period to wherever the current market is at that point. So it's a great way to get a lower interest rate for the first 5 years. And then the hope or the plan is to be able to refinance once rates drop anyway, which is going to be in a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, whenever they're predicting that rates are going to drop down. You can always refinance into a 30-year fixed rate mortgage or another longer term adjustable rate mortgage when that happens. But it buys you 5 years or 7 years of security, at a lower interest rate, because locking in for 30 years right now may not make so much sense when everyone's predicting that rates are going to fall in the next handful of years. So I think that's a great way to solve the problem for the short term. When interest rates are high right now, lock in for 3 years, for five. Most of the time we're doing probably 5-year arms right now, not really. 3-year arms might be too short of a period of time, but you can go 5 years, you can go 7 years, lock it in, and then we'll deal with the problem. Once the rates drop, we can always refinance you and give you a 30-year fixed mortgage.
Right. And the idea there, Gabi, is that you're qualifying at the lower interest rate, which makes it easier to qualify for the amount that you're looking to borrow.
Right, exactly. So they'll qualify you on that, whatever the payment's going to be for the next 5 years, as opposed to what it's going to be after it adjusts, which is great. There's another option of paying points, which is something that, has always been on the table. But if you pay a fee of 1% of the loan amount, so if we're talking about a $500,000 mortgage, if you're paying a $5,000 fee, you can lower the rate usually by about 1/4% for the lifetime of the loan. So say you want that 30-year fixed mortgage, or you want to add this as a function to one of the ARM products, you would pay that one-time fee, either 1% or 2%, you can, or 1.5%, there's several different options, but you can lower the rate permanently for the lifetime of the loan. So that's a great option for people who, are maybe flush with cash right now, but want to keep their monthly payment as low as possible. It's an additional fee that you pay at closing, but it again has that lower monthly payment. And when the bank looks to qualify you, they're going to look at that lower monthly payment after you paid the points, what that payment would be. That's the number that they're going to use to qualify you based off of. Similarly, to get qualified, that's dealing with the mortgage payments. The points, when you pay the points at closing, it pays down the fee for the entire life of the loan. There's something that's now in the market called a buy down. And we'll talk about like a 2-to-1 buy down, which is kind of a similar situation. But it happens where the seller, instead of the seller lowering the purchase price, or in conjunction with them lowering the purchase price, they can pay a one-time fee for the buyer. And what it does is it lowers the interest rate for, let's say, 2% in the first year, 1% in the second year, and then it goes to wherever the market rate is for the third year and beyond. So it's still a 30-year fixed mortgage or a 5-year ARM, or you're still under the same loan structure, but by the seller paying this fee, it dramatically lowers the monthly payment, whereas paying points will give you 1/4%. This allows you to drop your payment a full 2% in the first year, a full 1% in the second year, and then by the third year, it goes to the normal, wherever the current rates are right now. But hopefully by then, or around that time, that's really when people are predicting that refinances are going to start, when those interest rates drop. So this is a great way, not in terms of qualifying the payment, but for a buyer who wants to keep their payments as low as possible, this seller pay buy down is a really great option to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's another option in terms of qualifying. We've been talking about keeping the monthly payments low, but on the other side of things, a lot of people are unfortunately using their credit cards and building up some consumer debt. And those rates are a lot higher than where current mortgage rates are right now. So mortgage rates have gone up, but consumer debt and credit card debt and home equity line of credits and things like that have gone up even more. And a lot of the times paying off that consumer debt and maybe at the same time taking a little bit higher of a mortgage will have the effect of allowing you to qualify for more of a mortgage, because the monthly payments of your total debt is going to be lower, because you're using the lower rates, the mortgage rates, which are lower, to pay off the higher interest rate debt on your credit cards or things like that. And that allows you to qualify for more of the mortgage.
And I think, Gabi, that one warrants some further discussion, because one of the things that people aren't talking about the economy, which has supposedly been, very resistant to everything that the Fed's been doing, and a lot of the economic reports coming out are showing that that people are continuing to pay these higher prices and, quote unquote, being able to afford the higher prices. But what they're not talking about is the fact that while it looks like they're being able to afford these payments, the amount of credit card debt is higher than it's ever been, ever. So people are only able to afford it because they're going out on credit. And that is a disaster waiting to happen, especially if you're talking about credit cards, which are just a downward spiral. If you can't pay them off in a lump sum or really aggressively over time, it can create an issue. And then as far as qualifying, one of the things we always look at is car payments, because the amount, usually a car payment is like 5-year loan in most cases, maybe 3, maybe 7. It doesn't really work on lease payments, but if you own the car and you have a loan against it, sometimes, like we've seen clients that had almost $1,000 monthly payment, but they only owed like 10 grand, right? Or 15 grand, whatever it was. So sometimes paying off that 15 grand allows you to qualify for like another 200,000 on your mortgage, just because of the short amortization of car loans, and maybe student loans as well might be similar if they weren't written off by the government, which we did have a client who was one of the fortunate people that had that happen. But sometimes the installment payments are ones where you can have a pretty dramatic impact on the debt to income ratio by paying them off. And sometimes the balances are relatively low compared to what the actual monthly payment is.
Right. And I think that's usually like 3 times what the mortgage rates are right now. So it definitely warrants looking into to see if we can use that to help them qualify for more mortgages. At the same time, you can always, put more down. I think we're seeing that a lot. A lot of people are going all cash, but what we're seeing is a lot of people are putting, instead of the minimum of, let's say, 10 or 20% down, they're putting 30 or 40% down to, again, help them qualify. The more they come out of pocket, obviously, the less the mortgage amount is, the less we're going to have to qualify them for. Similarly, you can boost up your income where you can get a cosigner. And that's kind of an option that's usually available if people have, immediate family. A lot of times people use parents or siblings to co-sign on a loan, and that helps them, qualify for the loan, because we look at total income. So the income of the borrower who's occupying the property, as well as the income of whoever the cosigner is. So we can run those scenarios where we look at the total income with just you and what that's going to be, or you and a cosigner, and combining them together and saying, okay, how would this affect the purchasing power, and what could you borrow based off of that?
Yeah, and we've seen an increase also. We have a new partnership, not so new, but a great partnership with a company that's helping people co-purchase. So people that, for whatever reason, maybe they're, fresh out of college, it's a group of friends who all want to buy and get into the real estate game, but they can't qualify to do it themselves. So this startup is basically helping people team up and understand all the nuances of buying, but they're doing it as a group. And maybe they're buying a, second home, in upstate New York or somewhere, in the woods of California or wherever it may be, Florida, Texas. We've seen these all over the country now. And there's really kind of a movement toward this type of thing, and solving the most common problems with qualifying for loans, is that it's very difficult, especially with, prices kind of outpacing income growth. That it's becoming harder and harder for younger people to be able to save up enough of a down payment to be able to buy a home at today's prices. So some of these startups are doing some really cool things where, they're trying to accommodate people that are in that situation, kind of look at buying real estate in a different way, because most people look at it as like a solo event. But they're trying to kind of shift that thinking into more of a co-buying model. And then my all-time favorite thing to talk about is buying investment properties, which I just did 2 weeks ago. I bought a duplex. It's going to turn into 4 units, and it's going to be a great long-term investment. Those are great things to help people overcome the issues that they have. And the great thing about it, and I'm again always very transparent in this podcast, our income as loan originators is definitely down. Like, this is not a normal year for us. The number of transactions is way down industry wide, right? So even I would have, I'm in the industry. You'd think, oh, I'll know all the tricks of the trade, which we do, but even I couldn't qualify for a conventional loan on this property. So because of year-to-date income was just not normal. right? So even if I can't make exceptions for myself, there's only so much we could do for our clients. But there are loans that only apply to investors that are based on just the cash flow of the building. So if you have a good credit score, which is really important, you can get loans approved without even looking at what your employment or income is outside of that real estate that you're purchasing. So it's almost like they're looking at the building you're buying or the unit that you're buying as its own business entity. And if there's some sort of profit margin on it, or maybe even a small loss on it, you can still get the loan regardless of what your personal employment or income is. There are other programs like we call fix and flip or fix to rent loans for investors that also don't require they're really not looking at your personal income in order to qualify you, because they're basing it off of the investment itself, kind of looking at that property in a vacuum. So in a downturning market, as an investor, investors tend to see the opportunities more clearly than owner occupants, because they're less emotional about real estate. So if the numbers work, the numbers work. It doesn't matter if interest rates are 8%, 3%, but investors understand that that you make your money when you buy the property, and if you can secure it at a great price, and you don't have tons of competition, and you can get concessions from a seller, and you can get all these different things that you're hopefully going to be able to negotiate if you find the right deal, and in a non-emotional way, because you'll just walk away from a deal if it doesn't pencil out. There are ways to get investment property loans done despite these challenges. So people often think like, my first purchase has to be my primary home. It's not always the case. You could, let's say you're looking to buy a $2 million primary residence eventually, but you might be able to buy, in the meantime, maybe some investment properties that will help you grow your net worth over time. You could pull money out of those for a down payment on a primary residence down the road. There are a lot of investors that actually don't believe in the idea of owning a primary home. I don't happen to be one of those people, but they figure, well, you have money tied up in your equity in your primary home that you could be using for investment. So the long story short is that there are still ways to get into real estate, whether it be as an investor or as an owner occupant, and still be able to buy despite these economic downturns or strikes that may have caused income to be lower than usual. And that's what we wanted to primarily highlight today, is that don't lose faith, whether you're in the real estate industry or you're looking to buy for yourself. There are ways to do this. You just have to work with a mortgage team that understands these nuances and knows, okay, if this is your problem, then we should look at this type of loan, and just kind of put all the pieces of the puzzle together to try to find the way to be able to get you in. And I honestly think, and I put my money where my mouth is, that the people who are willing to buy now are going to thank themselves in 2 years when the interest rates come down and the buyers flood the market. And now we're back to the days where people were bidding, way above asking and pushing prices up further. So I keep saying this, but now is the time. If there's a will, there's a way. And if you can find a way to buy now, even though interest rates are high, or maybe, as I said before, because interest rates are high, that's what's creating this market opportunity that most people are missing. And the best time to buy as an investor is when other people are scared to buy. And the best time to sell is when everyone thinks it's a great time to buy, right? Because then you buy low, you sell high. And that's what I'm, trying to do myself. So I think that pretty much wraps everything up. We did have one question, which you guys can please feel free to add more if you could get them in the next minute or so. But the question is, would you mind talking more about the asset depletion loans or other types of mortgages for wealthy people who are not working, different types of them, your recommendations of which to go with, private lenders versus government? Sure. Thank you. That's a great question. Something we do often. So asset depletion loans, as I explained earlier, are loans that are based on liquid assets, retirement assets, and we basically convert those assets into qualifying income. So, and I'll give an example. We had a client a few years back who had sold his business in Silicon Valley, and he had $20 million from that sale. A nice, great opportunity. I don't know about anybody else, but if I had $20 million in the bank, I would probably not work for a while either, which is what this gentleman chose to do. And rightfully so. Go enjoy, the fruits of your labor. But a traditional bank, actually a few of them all denied his loan application if he was trying to take out a $2 million loan on a townhouse in Brooklyn. And they denied him because he doesn't have income. Well, of course you don't have income. You just sold your business. You basically sold yourself out of a job, but rightfully so. It was the right thing to do for him. So an asset depletion loan was perfect for this example because he had plenty of assets in the bank to be able to qualify. And there were different options that we looked at, but we were able to do that loan, in our sleep, so to speak. It was a very easy loan for us because of these programs. So there's different variations of them. Some backed by, for example, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They're only eligible if you're 62 or older. So those and the amount of income that they give you based on your assets is not all that aggressive. We have some private lenders, credit unions, things like that we work with through our broker channel, where they can get much more aggressive, where you might get 4 or 5 times as much income from those lenders to help you qualify as you would from one of the government programs. So there are different variations of it. If anybody has follow-up questions, you can certainly email us, mmteam@njlenders.com, or you can go to markmyman.com and find us there and submit any additional questions you have. But there are some great programs out there for the types of communities that you think would be well served by lenders that really are underserved in the high net worth clients. Retirees are another perfect example. If you're retired, you're probably not making a ton of income anymore because you're past your working days, but you might have some, a nice nest egg saved up. So we use this program a lot for retirees and seniors who are looking to qualify for bridge loans to move into senior housing. There's a lot of applications of this. But any client who is, higher net worth, lower on the income scale is a perfect candidate for this loan. That's exactly what they're there for. So I don't see any other questions, but we really appreciate you guys joining us today. Our next session will be December 13th at the same time, 9:30 Pacific, 12:30 Eastern. We are going to talk about my favorite topic even more, creating a New Year's resolution to buy investment property real estate. I'm talking about this a lot because I really believe in it. I think now is an opportunity as an investor. Go now before rates come down. Once rates come down, that window of opportunity is gone. We saw that 2 years ago when interest rates were really low. You couldn't make a deal pencil out as an investor because you had to pay such a high price to compete with owner occupants. So even though rates were low, your competition was so stiff that you couldn't make it happen. So I really think if you want to invest in real estate, or you have clients who do, have them check out that next session. They're always recorded, and for those who are registered, you'll get links to the recording so they can watch it on their own time, or you can check out the podcast on any of your favorite streaming services. But hope you'll join us for that next session. Thank you all again for joining us. Gabi, thank you for your insights as always.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next time. Take care.